we had this little motto. We hired for attitude over aptitude, which sounds crazy or stupid from a technology company standpoint, because you think that tech skills are everything. And certainly in the early days of SAP, those tech skills were in great shortage, right? But we took the attitude is that we wanted to look at people that had the ability to grow into that, right? I think, well, most of us in this industry, if we've managed to get through schooling and training, we have the ability to learn and continuously learn. So I can teach you that, our organization can teach you, how to use the ABAP for TM38, God, that dates me, right? But that technology, really, I look at it and go, oh my God, it hasn't changed. But anyways, you can learn that stuff, right?
Thanks so much for joining for another episode of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement on SAP. Today we have Evan Hugh, a bit of an OG in the SAP space and has had at least a decade of a break from it. But today we're not talking about SAP, we're talking about teams. And Evan is a legend in building teams, building companies, building teams, and identifying talent. Something that I know we can all relate to when talent feels scarce. Evan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, no, thanks for having me on. And yeah, it sounds a little embarrassing to say a legend, but anyways.
Your reputation precedes you. And what I'm grateful for is, you've been a coach and a mentor to me for quite a few years, and that's deeply appreciated. And full disclosure, also a board member from our team. So Evan, we wanted to ask for your advice on building teams, because whether you're leading a team of SAP professionals or leading a team of supply chain and procurement professionals, they're teams. It's not a hero with a bunch of workers. It needs to be a team, and that has a couple of layers to it, like an onion, like an ogre. And there's so many things to unpack there, but you've got a tremendous experience and perspective. What would you want people to think about teams?
Yeah, maybe I could think about sort of starting from the basics. There's teams, then there's work groups. And sometimes people mix that up, right? So a work group is a bunch of individuals that happen to be working in similar areas, but doing independent work, right? So they don't really interact a lot. Then there are true teams which have, common goals and objectives, and they work in collaboration. So there's a subtly but significant difference there, right? So I'm going to focus in on teams and teamwork. But unfortunately, a lot of teams actually work like work groups, which is not optimal because they're not working in coordination. And there is certainly the concept of the whole square and the sum of the parts that's in action. Because if you're a work group, the sum of the work is the sum of the work. It's one-to-one. And I think great teams can produce much more than the individual parts, right? So, and as you recognize over the years, and you and I have been around a long time, unfortunately, teamwork has become more important, right? And collaborations become more, because the problems are more complex. The speed that we operate is much greater than 20, 30 years ago. And when I got into SAP many, many years ago, R2, R3 world, I'm that old, right? R2. The concept of this kind of level of enterprise integration was a pipe dream, right? And there's been a massive shift over the last 30 years. And it's surprising how far we've gone. And it's also surprising and frustrating for me how little progress in some ways we have, right? Because some of the problems I saw 30 years ago are still with us, right? It's the way of the world. But when I look at teams, the big thing, and my schooling is engineering. And one of the problems I think, as many of us as engineers we have a lot of technical depth. We get almost no training on what I would call the soft stuff, right? So, and then there's, I think Peter Drucker was quoted as saying, the soft stuff's the hard stuff, right?
Sure is.
Yeah, and we tend to be really focused on the hard stuff, the technology, the code, the processes, the procedures, and all that, the optimization. Frankly, that's actually the easy stuff, to be honest, because we're trained. There's schooling for that and all those things. Where there isn't is the soft stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I like to joke how there's people, process, and technology. And the technology's easy, the process isn't hard, and the people are tricky.
Yeah, people are like, people have depth. There's more to them than you see. And that interaction is really critical. I mean, you I've talked about this, and Google did that seminal work on the project Aristotle project. People can look that up, the Aristotle project, but it was about what makes what makes for great teams that have great results and impact, right? And Google, being a company that prided itself on data, did their own analytics on their own teams and discovered that you know if we were so smart about hiring and all their own assumptions of what would make great teams. By the way, spoiler alert, Google thought having great skilled individuals would have high performing teams. And they discovered that, they analyzed about roughly 200 teams. Don't quote me on that, but to see, because they seem to have the same ratio of, success and failure that other companies, and they prided themselves on having the smartest people in industry that they would hire. And of course, what they discovered was the raw sort of crystal intelligence was not a factor at all. Of course, their degrees or their past work experience had almost no impact on the team, and it had everything to do with, if I remember correctly, 5 factors. But the one that stood out is psychological safety on the team, which is, do people feel comfortable to express themselves on the team? So the easy way to talk about that is to talk about what is not a psychological safe environment, which is the classic team environment where certain personalities dominate the conversation and everyone else sits back and doesn't say anything because they're afraid of the consequences of saying something that goes against these individuals, for example. So again, it's the soft stuff, but how do you get there, right? I mean, so the tone comes from the top, as they say. So the team leader and the organizational culture is really important, right? So if you're top down, do as I say, kind of place, no, that's what you're going to get, right? And you're
And
not going to
and
tap into the
you'll end
back.
up with a company that could be headed for a brick wall, and no one's going to say anything, but a few of them are going to get off the bus.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, holy, because if you say something, maybe, they go, well, that's really negative, Evan. Like, I don't appreciate that kind of that shutdown. And they go, but I see this problem and they don't want to address it. Or it gets worse, of course, and many of us have been, I started my career off in engineering, and I got to say, back in the 1980s, toxic work environment was kind of like the way things were done. That's their attitude. That's the way we do things here, right? And I said,
Yep.
wow, okay, I don't really want to be in that. So, that's one of the reasons why I decided I'm going to start my own thing and learn the hard way what I did well and I didn't, because I certainly have made my fair share of mistakes and I still make mistakes, and hopefully my
I think
mistakes are
we all.
repeated, but they're just brand new ones. But anyways, yeah, yeah.
You win
So,
or you learn, right? You win or you learn. We've both
oh yeah,
stacked up some big learning. I like to imagine that you've learned more, but I know I'm a little ahead of you, not in years, but in white hair. So I wonder sometimes if there's any correlation.
yeah. Well, I think genetically gifted in the graying subject. Don't look too closely, but anyway, yeah. The thing about I've always taken the approach of growing your organization from the inside. And I think, there's many ways to business success, right? And so you could take any path. I mean, there are lots of companies that are literally super toxic, hierarchical environments driven by basically carrots and sticks, right? Sort of external motivations and whatnot. That they're successful, fine. In our world, you have the freedom to build a company like that. But there is a cost to doing business that way, and there are
Yeah.
advantages, right? So I chose not to go that way, right? So I definitely wanted to build a business that I wanted to work in, and I wanted to work with people that I enjoyed working with. So, when I hired people, I looked for growth potential. So, I looked at essentially we had this little motto. We hired for attitude over aptitude, which sounds crazy or stupid from a technology company standpoint, because you think that tech skills are everything. And certainly in the early days of SAP, those tech skills were in great shortage, right? But we took the attitude is that we wanted to look at people that had the ability to grow into that, right? Because I think, well, most of us in this industry, if we've managed to get through schooling and training, we have the ability to learn and continuously learn. So I can teach you that, our organization can teach you, you know, how to use the ABAP for TM38, editor. God, that dates me, right? But that technology, really, I look at it and go, oh my God, it hasn't changed. But anyways, you can learn that stuff, right? Because it basically builds on itself. However, if you don't have a learning mindset, a growth mindset kind of a thing, and you're not interested in sharing and collaborating, then that's going to be a problem for us. Because as you recognize in enterprise software world, it's all based on teamwork, right? And not having experts. And you've probably seen the dysfunctional teams have, yeah, someone who's really smart and good about this area that doesn't get along with anyone else. And their attitude is, I don't need to get along with you. You do your job, I'll do my job, and we'll be fine. But the reality is it
Yep.
doesn't work that way. Right? So,
Yeah, because you end up with significantly subpar results. You know,
oh,
you can, I think we
yeah,
can both think of somebody that was in the team that managed to get through somehow, and then, you just, when they can't outgrow that,
yeah,
then they need to go grow somewhere else because
yeah.
otherwise they hold everybody else back.
I don't want to be disingenuous by saying that the tech doesn't count, because of course it counts, right? But that's, to be honest, the easier part, right? I mean, especially in today's world, there's so much material out there and open sourced, right? So, especially in the software world, right? So you can find opinions and talk to people, especially on open source projects, right? People are talking, opinions are being shared, and you can follow through that. And, the interesting thing is, for example, some of the best developers I ever worked with were actually self taught. They didn't actually have a formal degree in CS or anything, right? Some of them
Yeah.
were lawyers and economists, right? And you go, well, how did that happen? Well, it's because they had a learning mindset. They had the intellectual capability of doing it, but their soft skills side actually was part of their ability to do well in the industry, right? And as you know, by the way, technology constantly changes anyways.
Yep.
Like I said, my deep, deep knowledge in R2 Kix implementations on the DevOps side and running SAP macros, it's ancient history, like, and how many people need to know that anymore? Yeah, a few legacy sites must be still out there needing that, but it changed so much, right? And there's been generations of technology change, and it shifts. So what's
Yep.
enduring? It's your soft skills, your ability to for yourself, learn and grow and accept constant change. Because if you're in tech, you got to accept that. Number one. Number two is, how well do you get along with people? And if you're going to be a leader, how do you get the best out of your people? And not the
Yep.
most, by the way. I have this debate about people. Well, I'm going to squeeze the most out of my people. I went, oh boy, right? Because
Yeah.
people aren't that, they're not that linear, right?
It doesn't work that way, does it?
No, no. I have these debates with my hardcore coding friends, and I always, my ultimate answer to stump them is, how do you explain a 10x developer then? Right? A 10x developer isn't intellectually like crystal intelligence IQ 10 times smarter, right? At that level of measure. How do you expect explain the person that can literally generate that much productivity? 10x. And
Yeah.
it isn't their technical, deep, deep technical knowledge and things. It's a combination of all the above, right?
Yeah.
And
I feel like that empathy and the soft skills to go think about the people that are going to use the solution
yeah,
starts to smooth over and accelerate through a bunch of the things that stump others or that come back as defects later.
yeah,
That's something that we keep seeing, is that empathy is one of the most universally underappreciated soft skills. And it's difficult to screen for it because it's not even on a resume. Or if it is, it's a buzzword near the top.
yeah. It's tough to pick that out. I mean, like, if you have any of us that they're listening, have worked on an open source project, you can tell who the takers and who the giver and the contributors are, right? And of course, the takers never get that there's a little bit of a quid pro quo calculator going in all of our heads, right? And
Yeah.
I if I do a favor for someone, I they kind of will know that I got a little deposit in their quid pro quo account, and they'll probably do me a favor. Like if I'm stumped with something and I put the question out, you ever notice certain questions are answered and other questions are not? Often it's because it's this guy. He's just he needs something from us, and he's leeching. He's a leecher. There's leechers and seeders, if you want to use the BitTorrent kind of a thing, right? So there's a bit of, you got to give to get, and some people are, one thing is, I've realized too, back to the aptitude over aptitude issues, that unfortunately there's a bit of deprogramming that I've had to learn to do with people. And what I'm saying is that when we grow up in a family situation, we have, schooling, we have, our religious institutions that we grow up, our sports teams, whatever it is, we gain sort of a value system and a way of operating from that, good or bad, right? And then we're that accumulation of that, and then we get into the work world, and then we're taking that with us, right? And so when I hire people, I go, wow, there's some great parts about them, and there's some things I go, ooh, they need to. probably change a little bit there, right? And I could speak for a lot of engineers. They, you know, overly generalizing, they tend to be black and white on a lot of things. And as you
Yeah.
know, the real world is not very black and white. There's a lot of, because black and white assumes, like in my opinion, you got great data.
It's a lot of ambiguity and dealing with ambiguity. And there's a risk tolerance that goes with that too.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
the the personality traits that we often see in some of the highest performing developers are on a continuum of being highly supportive and adaptive and less assertive to being more risk tolerant and more assertive. Some of the best developers that we've worked with are a little on the assertive side because they'll stand up for asking for what they need to be successful, and they will stand up for the, hey, this doesn't make sense, let's talk it through. And some of the most effective procurement folks that we've looked at will stand up to say, hey, if you want that RFP done, then I need this by X because I'm not going to be that guy that sends out the RFP on December 15th with the January 2nd due date.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about assertiveness, and there's got to be an emotional intelligence that goes with it, right?
Yeah.
Because you kind of have to know where you sit in terms of you earned essentially within the team the ability and when to step and lean into it and when to say, you know what, I'm going to have a sidebar with somebody instead and read the room and all those kind of good things. And you start realizing, how many, years of experience and coaching most people that are good at this get slowly. And there's got to be some level of metacognition that you recognize, it's thinking about your own thinking, right? And the self-awareness. And there's a lot of people that I run into that have bizarrely, like the classic, they think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread for development because they have these strong opinions and they're very opinionated. I went, wow. If you stand back and go, wow, that guy should really listen, or she should listen to themselves, because they come off very strongly opinionated, but they're standing on a space of sand, right? Most
Yeah.
of us that I think the interesting thing is that whole Dunning-Kruger effect, that most of us that get
Yeah.
further and further and longer into in the industry and know more, we realize how little we actually know.
Yeah.
So I
The more we
tend,
learn, the less we know. 100%.
yeah, I tend not to, especially in the technical areas. I go, wow, everything's changing so freaking fast, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I want to hear the other people in the room. And there's another adage. I know there's a lot of adages out there, like if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of truth in that. I
Or
mean, I hope
don't,
that I'm,
oh, your 30 years experience? Wow, don't hit me with your 14.4 modem.
yeah, and there you go, right? So, I mean, there's a lot going on there that there's a consideration, but hopefully most people that you work with have some level of self-awareness, and they have a little bit of emotional intelligence to recognize the situation when they can lean in and have a
Yeah.
strong opinion.
Yeah.
But some people don't recognize they have this hammer mentality that I'm a hammer and everything's a nail to me, right? The one solution person that you deal with and going, holy man, okay, yeah, I get where you're coming from, but there's a lot of other considerations, externalities that they don't realize are there. So the solution unfortunately, the solution isn't as simple as it looks, right? And because I've had that kind of situation where I kind of, okay, I can see in the room they're looking at me like I'm an idiot because I'm saying these things, right? And I'm going, oh boy, okay, so I don't want to be condescending, but you guys are looking at only one dimension, and there's 6 other dimensions I'm not even considering because your world is this.
Yep.
And I got to where I am in the responsibility hierarchy because I do know those other things. And then I'll be honest, I don't know whether those 5 other factors are that important. Maybe you're right, and what you guys are talking about is by far the most important factor, and it doesn't really matter what the other ones are. But I have a hunch that it's probably not that clear, right? So that's why you have a good collegial discussion. That's what the psychological safety is, and we have that conversation, and hopefully there's enough mutual respect that I have some good friends that are, and when they say something, oh man, okay, crap, I really need to rethink this because they said something and I said I did not. That's back to being not the smartest guy in the room, and then listening to what they have to say. You don't have to agree, by the way. So there's another issue and concept that we talk about a lot is the difference between conflict, which is not good, and opposition or disagreement, which is fine, right?
Yeah.
So you can have that collegial discussion, and so
Absolutely. We've been talking quite a bit in our team about the difference between negativity and critical thinking, where negativity is a quick way to ask to go work somewhere else, and critical thinking and suggestions and identifying what we might be missing and how we need to make it better and how to solve for the goal and what would need to be true to meet the goal or meet success. Those are vastly different things. And you can raise something to bring critical thinking, but there's a way to do that. And helping to practice that capability creates that same reaction that you just talked about when you're talking to a friend that, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Shoot. I had an experience like that yesterday where because of some preconceived assumptions around how we would probably end up working with a particular company,
Yeah.
we typically avoid working with them because culturally we're very different. And fundamentally, to help do the right thing for our customer, yeah, 100%, we're going to need to figure out how to work with them in that case. And that's just the way it is. When we would otherwise usually just give them a big wide berth. But sometimes you've got to have that external question to go, oh, wait, I'm holding an assumption universally that isn't applicable here.
Yeah. And there's the challenge, right? After all these years of working, I don't always get it right either. I misread the room. I don't fully understand what's going on, or I step on someone's toes
Yep.
because I'm
Happens
like
sometimes.
recognizing you can always have to tell yourself we're all human. I'm having
Yep.
a bad day too, and you just pressed on a sore spot for me, and I'm getting annoyed. They don't know why I'm getting annoyed. I don't even know why I'm getting annoyed, and so I don't behave well in the meeting either. So that does happen, and that gets another interesting concept, which we never talk about actually in business typically. Is that I think Stephen Covey had that really interesting model that I like, and I was fortunate in getting a Stephen Covey training provided by my employer at the very beginning of my career. Right, I didn't know how valuable it was, but he had the concept of the
Totally.
emotional bank account, right?
Yeah.
So you make deposits by doing things for each other. It's back to what I talked about open source. There's the givers and takers, right? So you build that up and it allows you to take some risks and challenge and be challenged, right? So I think that takes time though, right? And that's the other problem in our world. A lot of people are impatient, right? And unfortunately, I think you have to be patient to get teams to work well together. And the question is, how patient are you for, right? And whether the pieces need to be changed and or the structure needs to be changed or things need to be addressed. So there's almost more art than science. I mean, by the way, the science of teams have gotten way better, right? So it's less art than science. There's still a little bit of art in there, unfortunately, but just talking about it's a good thing, right? But
Getting
yeah,
getting
go
getting
ahead.
people together and expanding our minds to learn those soft skills, because those are the things that you take with you no matter what. The technical skills expire, but the soft skills, when you learn to say please and thank you as a kid, that just carries through for the rest of your life.
It's interesting. Most of us grew up with the go to school, get a job, then I can settle in, and that's it, right? And of course, the world's nothing like that because it's constantly changing, and people, struggle with that constant change and the pressure. And it's kind of like it's literally a mind shift, and it's easy to say, it's hard to do. And maybe I was fortunate recognizing the world's ever changing, and there's always new challenges, and I'm okay with that. I wouldn't call it optimistic versus negativity, more of a bit of just a half full versus half empty starting point of just saying, oh, okay, change is natural, change is just part of what happens. So it is, as they say, what it is. So I can't change, so to speak. I can't, and a lot of people try to fight it, which
Yeah.
is impossible. It's
Know when to be the water and know when to be the rock, right? Water
yeah,
goes
well,
around the
yeah.
rock, and sometimes you can try to fight it, but it
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
usually
that
work.
Bruce Lee thing about, beat water, right? So there's a lot of truth in that. And especially, I mean, today's world, I mean, it's hard to sort of fathom, but change is actually accelerating. And that really frightens people. I think that's why we have the reactions against that we do. And there's only been one constant, in, the sort of the human civilizations, there's constant change, right? So now
Yeah.
we have another bigger discussion around what's going on with AI and especially GPT based technologies and large transformational models. Those are game changers. And I don't know if how many people really understand how much of a game changer it is, right? And we've had multiple game changers in the last 30 years, right? The internet didn't exist in its current form 30 years ago, right? We're only 30 years, not barely 30 years in, then smartphones, right? Which means you have ubiquitous connectivity from anywhere, which is another game changer. And now
Yeah.
we're into this whole world of AI that's actually making an impact. I mean, the promise of an AI has been around since I was a graduate student, actually, right? But we're actually, in my opinion, anyways, we're here now. right? Whether we would like it or not, we're here. So that's a whole other consideration. So, yeah, I mean,
I, I
yeah,
love to think that that does nothing but reinforce how critical the soft skills are and how
well,
important building a
yeah,
team is and figuring out building the skills to work together as a team and to build teams.
it gets interesting because for the first time, you've probably heard for years and years and years, software companies always had these new productivity stuff. So you can have basically, software without having to write code, right? And actually getting close to that now, right? I see what the young developers do, and I'm over their shoulder, so I'm not doing it myself, right? But how to use GPT technology to write your code. And
Yeah.
and most of us are starting, little light bulbs are going, holy crap, we're almost there now. Right? And you can see
Yeah.
because literally generative nature of it is generative, right? So it's going to accelerate. I mean, think about it. Chat GPT from a commercial launch is, a year, only been a year, right? Not even, right? So look at the rapid transformation impact it's already had, right? And it's just starting, right? And because it's generative, this is the wild card. No one, previous technologies weren't generative, right? Yeah, so they couldn't improve on themselves. Technically speaking, this can improve on itself. So it gets
Yeah.
pretty crazy in terms of where this could go, right? So for individuals, I mean, developing those soft skills is probably the thing that's going to carry you through this if you're going to be comfortable with that, right? And there's lots of, policy and political and societal changes that are coming, which is beyond the scope of our conversation. So, um,
That is brilliant. Evan, it is always a pleasure. I'd love to invite you to share your, top one or two things that you hope somebody listening would remember for growing a team and identifying early potential and then nurturing that they would remember 6 weeks,
yeah,
six
I
months
mean, just,
later.
if I want to summarize this Armenian conversation, I guess, I've always looked at things as, the soft stuff is the hard stuff. So as a leader, you got to focus on building your own soft skills and then the soft skills in the team. But being explicit about that B'nai B'rith Brown had that statement, clear as kind. So don't assume that people understand your intentions and you have to work towards having a trusted environment where you can have difficult conversations. And they don't have to be difficult if you do it right. They just are conversations that people would find normally sensitive that people would avoid, right? So if you can spend time with your staff, and it's an investment, by the way, and I think it's like compound interest. The earlier you make that investment, the more payoff you're going to have. And conversely, if you don't make that investment, basically you bring on new team members, say, here, yep, here's the stuff, here's your GitHub account, here's the code we've been working on, off you go, see ya. You're going to have problems, and so you need to carve out that time and space to sit with them and spend time understanding what they're doing, but it's not telling them what to do, it's not advising, it's actually listening and questioning. And maybe if you need to, as a leader, you remember you're not responsible for the work they are, you're accountable, is you request things from them, but you let them solve it. So but soft stuff's the hard stuff. That's all the soft stuff. And and then I think that's what it's about. So
Soft stuff's the hard stuff.
yeah.
Evan, thank you so much.
Oh,
And
you're
for
welcome,
everybody
Sean.
watching, this is another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. Companies running SAP. Have an amazing week. See you again next week.